Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever it is, wherever you are, welcome to the Good Values podcast. In this episode, I'm going to have a bit of a recap over the last 9 guests that I've had. Now, this is episode 11. Episode 1 was just me introducing the new concept. I did have a previous podcast called Studio Buddies, and there were 16 episodes, and now I'm on the 11th episode of Good Values. Now, the Good Values podcast is a bit of a different format. Studio Buddies was more conversational, and I had a co-host, and we only ever had one guest. And for Good Values, I wanted to relaunch a different idea, really, as opposed to trying to emulate what the first podcast was creating. Because I don't have a co-host, it's quite difficult to be conversational that way. And the odd episode, I'm going to be on my own, just talking to you about different ideas. For this episode, though, I'd like to show my appreciation for my past 9 guests by showing you clips of the conversations, just in case you haven't seen the episode. This will be a nice little taster of each guest. First of all, I'd like to talk about my first guest on this podcast, episode number 2, which is Ayisha. Ayisha Jay was someone who I met in Bangor College, Coleg Menai, and she's only a young student, but she's a big personality. She's a fully formed human being. What I mean by that is she has a great moral compass. She's a very kind and sweet person. She's very creative. She's very outgoing and independent. And she's a good friend of mine. I've not known her for long, but I love her to bits. The clip I'm going to show you now is where she shares with the audience some poems that she's written. And she even performed them and shows her watercolour painting to frame the writing. I'll show you in the clip. So here it is.
Funny enough, I remember the first year they told us, go around, draw a map of the place.
Yeah.
I was like, why are we doing this? This is pointless. But we did it anyway.
Yeah.
And then I came across this square on the floor that somebody spray painted. Like, they must have been spray painted a piece of paper or something. It was really colourful. And I'll never forget that, because I started doing this, really colourful square.
Oh,
and I had, I drew it as if it was, the paint was dripping off. And then I tried it with watercolours. I'm not sure, I know you wouldn't have seen it because it wasn't in my... I did a poetry piece based off it, and I photocopied it because it was from the first, in the very beginning of the year. But I couldn't recreate it the way I did it.
Yeah.
So I photocopied it and wrote the poem over it. And it was, what I did was I drew the square and I put the watercolours as if they were dripping down, it almost looked like coral coming from the square.
Yeah.
But when I blended it a little bit with the water, it kind of leaked into the square.
Oh, wow.
So then it sort of looked like this mirror. So for Alice, the Looking Glass.
Yeah.
It kind of reminded me a little bit of that.
Oh, brilliant. That's amazing.
So it's really strange how I just saw this colourful square and that was it.
Yeah.
Most of my project was based off colourful squares. Worthless Reflection, written on the 1st of the 4th, 2022. Watch me beg for you, beg for your attention, beg for your approval. I'll rip myself apart to be perfect for you. I'll starve, I'll rip my hair out, I'll change everything. And I fucking hate myself. I get bored of looking at the same girl that stands in the mirror with tears in her eyes. You know my name, not my thoughts. You know my body, not my heart. By Ayisha Jay. Desire for the Devil, written on the 1st of the 4th, 2022. They say tears of an angel, I say differently. I'm an angel sent from hell. I'll ruin your life. I thrive off your attention, and I'll stab you in the back. Watch me cry to you, then laugh in your face. 1 minute you're everything, the next you're nothing. You'll obsess over me, your head filling with desire. All the while, I'm using you as an escape. You love to hear my voice, but you never listen to my words. By Ayisha Jay. Drowning Thoughts. Written on the 1st to the 4th, 2022. There is so much going through my head. So fucking much. Yet I never say a word. I just want to scream. Scream into a mirror. Scream at someone. Scream at the top of my lungs. I want to let it go. I need to escape. I need to breathe. I'm one step away from disaster on every decision I make. I know it'll kill me, yet I still do it. If I told you everything, would the guilt die? By Ayisha Jay.
No, I love that. I thought that was really sweet and a real unique feature for a podcast. I very rarely will break away from the conversation, and even though it works more like an interview, with Ayisha Jay, we've got a very casual rapport, her and I, so it became something where cutting away from it was quite a nice little feature for the episode. And it didn't seem to break the momentum too much, in my opinion. I mean, let me know in the comments if you disagree, but I feel like it was just a nice, what do you call it? Kind of like an interlude or just kind of a segment that cut into her doing her readings. So I love that. I thought that was really nice. These features that I'm going to show you now are, because that one was kind of unusual, that I very rarely have that where it's not part of an ongoing conversation. This is unusual because it's an abstract artist who I'm talking to, another person who I love to bits and I'm very close friends with, Petra Goetez, which is, in the English pronunciation we'd say Petra Goetez. She's a German artist who I'm very close friends with, and I see her quite often. We're collaborating currently on a piece together, and in this part of her episode, which is episode 3 I believe, I ask her about a piece of work that she drew when we were in the same university together. Eventually she went off and studied somewhere else, and but when we were in the same place together, I think she may have just left, I'm not sure, but we were talking quite often and meeting online. It was during lockdown times, and she shared with me a piece that she'd drawn, and I think it was during a drawing session that was a group that she invited me to join, and I have, and it's fantastic. And the drawing that she's done is one which I really just appreciate the tones that she's used. It's the paper is a toned piece of paper, and then the colours that she's used are bright and add loads of character to this still life study. Well, see what you think. I'll show you the conversation now. I'm very set in my ways in certain ways as far as drawing. I'll approach things some ways and then I will start applying light and shadow. Whereas I've seen you do drawing where you're not using these tools which I have built in to try to fix a drawing where it's gone awry, and instead you will create this, I don't know, cohesion within the drawing, which I struggle to do because I have so many fiddly little rules that I'm trying to apply and heighten in certain areas and pull back in others. So I still see, I remember the one which you did on toned paper where it was, I think it was red, pastel and white, and you had a teapot and a table of things. I love that drawing, and I said to you at the time, I really love that drawing. I think that's a lovely, that should be framed somewhere. So that's a fantastic piece that you did. And things like that, I think,
thank you,
comes from artists like yourself, which I struggle to do. And it just has this reality to it, which I'm trying to be too strict when I'm trying to describe reality. And you are seeing it through your own lens, I suppose, and you don't have the same strictness.
No, I only use it as a source, really. Maybe it's different. You want to transform it into an artwork. For me, it's just a source.
Yeah.
When I'm drawing, let's say, a piece of machinery.
Yeah. Yeah.
or piece of my piece. No, when I created my degree show, I try to draw pieces to have an idea of the composition, because I don't know so much about a composition which is working good. So I have to try things out. I'm using like photography. I'm using photography and drawing rather as a tool for me to go towards my sculpture.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, I thought that was really charming as a piece. It's something which I'd like to see framed as a piece of work, because I think it's quite accomplished and it's just got a lot of character to it, and it's just a great style. I think it just shows her ability to render something figurative but not realistic. It's not like a photo in any sense of the word, but it's figurative as a study. I don't know, I just really like that, where you can have expressive lines and not have to be so strict with how you render the piece. I just thought it was really nice. It's always stuck in my head as a really nice, colourful pop piece. Not like pop art, you know what I mean. It pops, the colours make it pop. So yeah, that's the clip of my conversation with Petra. Now, the next clip I want to show you is from another close friend of mine. Now, a lot of these people are people who I know quite well. Some of the guests aren't. Some of the guests I've met for the first time. But this gentleman I know fairly well. And another very close friend of mine. Someone who I love to bits as well and really respect. And this is John Hughes. And straight away, when I asked him to introduce himself, he told me enough to show a really nice background and said a lot about his character, that he wouldn't introduce himself as an artist, but more as a maker of things. And I thought that was really interesting and a really insightful comment about himself. And the work that accompanies this podcast, I thought shows his skill and ability. And it was just a real honour to be able to talk to him. So here's that clip.
I'm basically a maker of things. Don't call myself an artist or anything else. And I've made things since I was a young child. And that's what I still do, whether it's a painting or a house or a car or a motorcycle. I make things. That's what I do.
And you've done that all your life, is that correct? Or is it from a certain age that you started focusing more on being a maker of things?
No, I've done it all my life since I was a baby.
Yeah, excellent. And is there anything more specific? Are you more inclined to drawing or painting or sculpting? Is there any specific discipline that you're more drawn to than others?
Yes, drawing really, because it's difficult to make something without having a plan or a drawing. My father used to, when I was small, I'd say, "Can you make me one of these?" He'd say, "Make me a drawing." So you've got to have a drawing to work to. So that's how that came about. But I've drawn since I was, 2-year-old or even younger.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
My relatives, my auntie, my grandparents, they used to keep all the old Christmas cards for me to draw on the back, which was plain, because you couldn't get in. I was born in 1945, which was at the end of the Second World War, and you couldn't get sketchbooks, or you could hardly get pencils, but you had to make the best of what you had, and that's what it was.
No, I love that work, and it was nice to see a picture of John when he was young. It was a great conversation, and I hope to have him on the podcast again, because I can talk to him for hours, and I often do. Now, this next clip I'm going to be showing you is another person who I'm close friends with. I love this girl to bits, or this young woman to bits. She's shown a great strength of character over the years, and she's incredibly talented, and I'm just glad that I got to have her on the podcast, because she's not currently practicing as an artist, which I think is a real shame, but at the same time I think that she's got that skill and ability, and it's just up to her when she becomes engaged with that practice again, if she chooses to. Of course, she's under no obligation to, but I think it'd be a real loss to the arts to not have someone like this in the industry. Now, this is Becky Rixon, and the clip that I want to show you of Becky is where we discuss how her work before she went to university was influenced by her interest in psychology. And I thought that the drawings that she provided was quite interesting, even though her impression of it, or her memory of that time, was that it was kind of a basic formula of a way of taking a thought or an idea and adding a few layers and developing work based on that. But I thought it was a real potential to expand upon that, and I found it really nice and insightful to have her explain how she produced that work and why she was interested in it. So here's the clip of Becky talking to me about that.
I started out drawing animals. I love doing animals and stuff. 'Cause I do love animals.
Yeah.
But then I went into portraits, and I was like, oh, I'm not going to be very good at portraits. But then I was actually decent at them. And then for A-level, I did identity, because obviously school always give you a basic brief, and it's always something like identity or childhood or something so basic. But I went along the lines of identity, and I took photos of people, overlapped them, and then drew the photo, which is what you kind of do in A-level, just draw a photo or whatever.
Yeah. It's quite interesting with the overlap. So you've got several faces on top of each other.
Yeah. And it was all about the confusion of who these people are and stuff. How other people affect the person you are.
That's quite interesting, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, it may have felt quite a basic idea, but I've actually not heard of that before.
Yeah, because I did psychology A-level as well, and I love psychology, knowing how other people think and stuff like that. So I kind of mixed psychology A-level with art A-level and did it through that.
No, that would have been really good, because I suppose there's lots of, they call it micro expressions and things, which could have been a series of studies. I don't know if you've, because did you do a lot of drawing? Did you do tons of it?
All my A-level was drawing. My whole A-level was based on other people and stuff like that, yeah. Because I did, I started that project with maps, and then drawing people's faces over the maps of that person comes from that place, and then kind of built it up to be oh yeah, so these people also affect this person and make them the person they are, because apparently you as a person are like the 5 people around you. I can't even remember what that quote is. I can't remember. It's the 5 people closest to you will make you.
I really appreciate her ability to draw, and the fact that she produced a whole body of work that was photography and film and light and smoke, nothing to do with drawing at all, when she's so skilled at drawing, is the type of artist that I like to see them exploring different types of work which is more unorthodox. Speaking of which, the next person on this clip I'm going to show you is another close friend of mine. This is someone who I spoke to very often, and I'm hoping to feature more often on the channel. This is Mike Davies, and he is someone who's a skilled sign writer, and he's also a printmaker. He's very good at painting, and I haven't seen much of his drawing, but I can only imagine that he's the same as far as he's got skills and abilities with figurative drawing as well. But in this part of the podcast, we discuss how his printmaking, it's kind of screen printing actually that he's doing, is he's using experimentation in the process. And I thought that was really fascinating, to take something which is so traditional and ritualistic with the actual setup and the procedures when it comes to actually making a print, and then to tinker with the different elements and aspects and tweak little bits here and there to make it produce different results. was quite an interesting part of the conversation. So I wanted to show you that clip. Here it is. The ability to kind of transform the landscape into something else where somebody else can be transported there. Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah,
and that's I went to an exhibition in Liverpool again when I was at Hundredhill College, and it was a Dutch artist, and he created a room full of smoke, strobe lighting, and very vibrant sounds. And you had to sign a disclaimer before you went in there. But as you went into this white room full of white smoke, the sounds turned into lights. And the more you went into the room, the more sounds you heard, the more lights you saw, the louder it got, the brighter it got. It took me to another place and time.
Yeah,
I've never had any art piece experience any art piece like that. I've looked at paintings and almost felt like I was in the painting. I've looked at other paintings. One particular one was a Laughing Cavalier. Just for that split second, I could almost hear him actually laughing.
Yeah.
But this particular piece took me, and it took me like something that never happened to me like that before at such a level, and that's only heightened my interest in doing that through painting.
Yeah,
because I think I'm a painter more than, well, I'm a printer, but I want to be a painter.
Yeah, well, you have started to show me how you're doing screen printing, but with unorthodox approaches to that as well. Is there anything that you can tell us about that?
Well, it's again, this was with John at uni. I was doing these let's say abstract shapes with and the inks being thrown about randomly on the screen before actually doing the print. And he suggested that I might try and put some thread on the canvas, paint the canvas different colours, put some thread on the canvas, little bits of paper and things like that. Overprint that and then remove the threads, remove the paper, and see what we've got that one. I thought, well, that's good. You know, I'm up for letting the art create itself. So I glued them down. I glued them all down and painted them, and then overprinted them, and I got this kind of a 3D effect. And which I'm really, really pleased with. I'm not always pleased with what I do. Most of what I do, I'm not pleased with. Until I go back a few days later, and then I can see something in it that I didn't see originally. But with this form of screen printing that I was doing, I instantly liked it.
I thought that was really nice. The actual, you could see the lines and the different swirls and how it was unpredictable what the outcome would be. And I really like the idea of that. Now, him and I are considering and starting to collaborate on little pieces of work. We're just kind of easing into different ideas at the moment, but I think we've got this interest in collaborating a little bit more in some of our work because we've got a lot of overlap with our interests and our appreciations. So I look forward to doing that and to sharing it with you on this channel as well. Now, the next person I'd like to show you on this clip it's a close friend of mine who I love to bits. I know I've said that for everyone, and it's going to be no offence to the people who I don't say that about, but all of these people helped me launch this new podcast by doing me the favour of featuring as guests, and that is the case for everyone. But to get started, I relied on people who I love very much and I have a great friendship with. And this person I don't talk to as often as I'd like to, because her and I were in different disciplines in the same university, and she would be in applied arts, but I got to know her in the induction period when we were both first years, and immediately I just got along with her so easily. I'm talking about Sarah Edwards, and the clip I'm going to show you is where she's introducing her degree show work. Absolutely beautiful, and it's about the female form, but it's abstract work that she's made, and it's ceramic. She's painted it, and on top of this she has layers and layers of graffiti style writing. Not graffiti as in styled lettering where it's really shaped, designed letters and coming up with kind of tags or anything like that. More graffiti where people just go out and want to write over things like graffiti you get in a toilet cubicle or on a school desk, something like that. But the way she's done it is just layers and layers and layers of writing. So this is us discussing her work.
Yeah, well, obviously I'm interested in the female form in general. And I like putting out there, just building confidence up, I suppose, in one way or another, and just getting across the taboo subjects and the things that aren't really mentioned that much with women, and just trying to get those type of messages out there of the daily stresses and problems that women have to go through daily, even from little things to the big things.
Yeah. And am I right in thinking that you even include writing on your ceramic sculptures?
Yeah, the series I've just done, it's all so that the outsides of them are all it's like graffiti style, really. So it's just layers and layers of a variety of words. This series all relating to body positivity and female sexuality. So I've picked, I think there's 25 words altogether, and I've just slapped them on and just layered them up. So basically every time you look at the piece, you see a different word or a different image, because I've put loads of little patterns and things on there.
Yeah.
And there's a few secret little words and things that some people have noticed and some haven't. Yeah.
Oh, that's brilliant. So it's almost like little treats for the keen observer.
Yes, exactly.
Excellent. Oh, that's interesting. No, I thought that was beautiful work, and I was so happy to be able to showcase it whilst we discussed her process. And she's another person who I hope to have on the podcast again, and also to be able to collaborate with her potentially in the future. Although we haven't discussed that, she's definitely someone who I'd really like to work with. I really admire her work and her as a person. Now, the next person on here, I don't know that well. And it was interesting to talk to her because we haven't talked very often. And it was a little bit more of finding out about this person, which was an interesting and different kind of dynamic to the podcast. I really appreciate it. Her work is absolutely beautiful. I'm talking about Chris Neeves. And in this, I want to talk about or show you a clip about how Chris finds her inspiration. And we don't go into every aspect of where she gets inspired from, but generally we try to cover where you can get inspired from. If you're a less traditional style of artist and someone who is generally someone who can make art out of any type of materials, because I'm very specifically based in pens, pencils and paint. I don't do much else. I can, but I'm not inclined to. Chris is not that way. She can pick up pens, pencils, paint. She can pick up wood. She can use charts. She uses material, as in fabrics, all kinds of things. So she's one of those creatives who will quite happily take on any kind of materials so long as she can see something in it and she has this idea to run with. So this is us talking about where she finds her inspiration. I would ask, how is it that you got started making art?
I've been creating since I can remember, from a child.
Really?
Yeah, making and creating, not just two-dimensionally, three-dimensionally, And my dad taught me woodworking skills when I was 6-7 years old. So I've been constructing, I've been drawing, painting. I could use a sewing machine by the time I was 8.
Fantastic.
Just creating, making. It's something that I've just it's part of me. It's something that is there, and it's always been there.
Yeah.
To be drawing, to be making, to be creating, to constructing. It's so I don't just limit myself to one thing in a way. I don't just stick to the painting or watercolor or the oil paints. there's always a crossover.
That's fantastic.
And even in daily life now, you know, I've just constructed a bench out of 2 chairs.
Really?
So, I'll send you a photograph.
Yeah.
It's so.
Yeah, please.
It's part of me to be creating, constructing. You know, it's. Let's say, it's been there since I was a nipper.
That's excellent. So you must see potential in almost everything that you look at. If it's all types of media, you must see a lot of different environmental objects and items that you can incorporate. Is it patterns or textures, or is it colours, or what is it that draws your eye towards your type of work that you produce? Can it be anything?
It can be anything. It can be anything.
Really?
I keep a small sketchbook of just things, ideas that I might use next week, 5 years. I'm just about to start on a series of paintings around carousel horses. You know, the
fantastic, yeah.
There's one actually in town now, locally, so I've been going and photographing it.
Oh, wow.
So, and that, I started that and did the preliminary sketches for that about 15 years ago. So I just always keep those ideas in a little book.
Oh, amazing. That's fantastic. So I suppose it kind of relates to inspiration to an extent. Is there any either artist or filmmaker or author or poet or anything where you think, if I ever need inspiration, or I know that I draw inspiration from a specific source, is there anything where there is inspiration for you and you know it's consistent and reliable?
Again, that can just totally vary. At the moment, there's a musician, John Bowden, and he did a series of 3 CDs, music CDs, and that for me is again, it's shelved, but it's another area of inspiration.
What type of music is it?
Folk music.
Oh, folk music, lovely. Yeah. And were you saying poetry as well? Did you say?
Yeah, poetry, just literature, poetry, film, walking down the street.
Everywhere.
I'm never short of finding inspiration from something.
No, I thought that was really nice for her to share that it was actually a musician who she had the inspiration from. It's quite unique because everyone else who I spoke to would find their inspiration from either films or different artists, and I'd be the same. I get a lot of my inspiration from either films or television series, and I don't think there's any, hierarchy of where it should come from. Chris also expressed that poetry would be a big inspiration, and I think things like that are nice to share, and it kind of bookends with Ayisha at the beginning with her poetry. Now, I'm not sure if that's the type of poetry that Chris is talking about. I can imagine it'd be more classical poetry, but I still do think that having that element in a younger artist, and Ayisha is the youngest guest that I've had on the podcast, and to see that she has kept this poetry running through her work, so that it's just aligned with her creative process, I think is a really beautiful thing to see still alive and well. And I really like the fact that Chris discussed that and tried to share certain parts of her process. But for the next thing that I want to show you is someone who I've got to know only online. I've never met her in person. And this is someone who's called Melanie, but I know her as Mistbind Machina. And she is someone who invited me onto a Discord years ago. I really liked her work. I thought it was really bold and striking. It had a lot of really interesting characters. It's like she'd created her own world, and there was like a lore to it, as far as there was different rules that dictated the physics of that realm. And it just seemed like she had conceptualized this whole universe. So talking to Melanie regarding the artist that she admires and trying to communicate that to people who are less involved in art and culture in that way and trying to relate it to people who you see at a normal workplace, which is not in the arts. So I really found this quite humorous and relatable. So here's the clip of me talking to Mistbind Machina. I've been discussing with people how it seems to have flipped, in my estimation, from beauty first, concept second to now concept first, beauty second, in my idea of how I've been observing fine art. So I used to look at a painting and think, oh, it's so beautiful, and then you start to see the layers of concept within that. And these days I see a concept hit me really strong, and then you've got to find the beauty in that concept, is the way that I've been interpreting the change in the movement, I suppose. Do you agree, or is it different for you?
I agree with that, and the kind of historical precedence of that is the fact that the Dada movement happened, the anti-art movements happened, and they were all about meaning first, and then if you find something pretty in it. And actually with the Dada movement, they didn't even want you to find the pretty in it. They didn't want you to see beauty. They only wanted you to see a message.
Yeah.
And I understand why that movement happened, and it's a very good and strong movement, but the fact that Hello Kitty is recognized internationally, but Frida Kahlo, who, I had to explain to 3 of my coworkers yesterday who Frida Kahlo was, because there's an art show in my city that is showing paintings of her this month, and I was so excited about it, and they didn't know who the hell she was.
Oh no!
And I was like, she was in Coco. How do you not know who she was?
Yeah, shocking. Well, that is something where I really hope that fine art can have a reconnection with the public, and not that I think the old days were predominantly about the public, but I feel as though the average person would be inspired and uplifted by artistic depictions and renditions of specific events, and they'd feel a significance to just the narrative of life, and I don't know, I suppose our engagement with different things that may seem mundane being depicted beautifully can inject a bit of... Sorry, yeah.
Oh, I was just going to say, I always felt the Impressionists made a good balance of that, where they had meaning, and they had meaning, they had depth, they had a lot, a bunch of hidden layers. Yeah. But then itself, the image, the painting they made was really pretty. Yeah. And so you could get any audience member, you could get any viewer to first look at it and be like, that's a pretty image. And then when they're there for more than 30 seconds to look at the image, they will absorb depth. They'll see other meanings in it. Yeah. And that's often a thing that I've observed is you have to be able to connect someone's eye for more than just 10 seconds. Absolutely. Because if you don't, then they're just going to see that image, oh, that's a cool image, and then go to the next one.
Now, that's another person who I could have spoken to for absolutely hours, and as much as I don't know her that well, I definitely plan on having her back on the channel again, and we could talk all day and all night. I could already tell that we had a lot in common with our preferences with animation and things like that, but when she'd share things about Frida Kahlo, I thought that was really nice, because it showed that there's types of artwork which people just aren't aware of, except for it's similar with Vincent van Gogh, how people will always think, oh, he's the guy who cut his ear off, and it's a part truth, kind of, but there's so much more to these icons in art. And the same with Frida Kahlo, where the only thing that people might know is the film that was made about her, or the film starring Salma Hayek. So I'm not sure, maybe they don't know that much. From what Melanie said, there wasn't even that type of awareness of who Frida Kahlo was. And it's an incredible, tragic story. And I'm sure that a lot of you out there will be aware of this, but if you're not, then please look up some of these people who we try to introduce in each of the episodes of the podcast that we find inspirational. So, speaking of inspiration, I'm going on to the last person who I've had as a guest. An absolute honour to speak to her, someone who I've never met before, and she was recommended by someone who I love to bits, and I hope to get on the podcast soon. And she was introduced to me through a mutual friend of ours called Andy Soto. Now, Andy, I hope to get on the podcast. She was the only guest on my first podcast, Studio Buddies, and she's the one who recommended I have this person on. And this is Gabriela Handal. She has her own podcast, which I really recommend you checking out, and her art channel. It's an audio-visual channel where she does... she'll introduce her own artwork in a way, and she'll show tutorials on rendering, and she knows a lot about materials, and her philosophy in art I thought was really interesting. But in this clip I talked to her about her inspiration, so here's that part of the conversation.
What even is inspiration, and is it necessary in order to make work? And it's yes, I have like a personal beef. I mean, I don't give to anyone. I'm not gonna be like, what do you mean you have an artist block? You're lame. Or I don't. I'm not gonna tell somebody that
Yeah.
Because it's also like it's like, where is the cutoff of where's the cutoff? Cutoff. Maybe somebody feels like I recently talked to an artist named Randy Ortiz who said he has been experiencing a burnout for a while now, and what is that? You don't feel inspired. You don't know what to do. You don't know what to draw. You don't know what you want to talk about in the drawing. And I think Andy actually might have said, I think she has said something of the sort when I have heard her talking about it, where, or rather, there's a saying that I really like, and I think it's by Picasso, that says, inspiration exists, but it has to find you working. So the thing about that is that whether the inspiration exists or not, you should be working. You should be making the thing. So I think that speaks more to discipline, in the sense that whether you want to draw or not, whether you know what to draw or not, you should sit down and draw something. It doesn't matter, regardless of the circumstances. And I mean, what those circumstances are, and whether the individual chooses to just neglect everything in their life in that moment for 10 minutes to sit down and draw something, it depends. So sometimes you don't have to neglect everything in your life in order to draw for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
But even, 5 minutes, it doesn't matter. Just, I don't get to draw necessarily every day as long as I would like to, but I get to draw most days for a little while at least, which is about volume and quality, kind of, or at least volume. And volume is very important because it accumulates over time. So I think I'm veering off a little bit on the question there.
No, this is the difficult answer. I like it.
Yeah.
It's good.
Yeah, so in a way, if I go with the idea of inspiration in the sense that you want to draw, or, there's this impetus, I really want to take just the ballpoint or whatever and make and draw a thing, whatever it is. I want to draw that portrait of the person, and I want to draw that leaf or something. I kind of always feel that way. I kind of always want to draw. And I mean, I don't know if I would say that in that case I'm always inspired. I don't know, because I'm not sure if that's exactly what that is.
Now, again with this guest, I don't know her very well, but I could already tell that I would gladly speak to her for the rest of the day through to the next day. She's a fascinating person and endlessly generous with her ability to share her knowledge, and she's got so much to say. So I'll definitely leave links for all of the artists underneath, and for Gabriela Handal I'll leave a link to not only her YouTube channel, but that will have where her podcast is as well, which is a conversation about art. And she has podcasts in English and in Spanish, which is really interesting. She's from Panama originally, but as far as I'm aware, she lives currently in New York. And it was a real pleasure to have her on as a guest. I hope to have her on again, because it'd be easy to pick her brains about any kind of subjects. And it was just I really have a lot of respect for her passion about certain aspects of art. I agree with her about most of the things that we talked about, and the only things that are outside of that are things that I don't know enough about, so I'd need educating more. So that's what a lot of this podcast is talking to people and finding out what their ideas are and where they get their kind of their opinions from, their skills and ability are honed by these certain things, and trying to educate myself through the conversations with these people. Now, it's been really nice to have so many guests on. I have lots of other guests planned. I have certain guests booked and others who I'm talking to and trying to figure out a time when they're free. A lot of people are busy when they're practicing artists or just generally in life. So please try to keep up with the channel if you can. I always appreciate people who can like and comment and subscribe and ring the notification bell. I also ask you, if you can, to share this channel or any videos that you've liked on my channel with your friends or family or anyone who will appreciate this, because I am trying to grow the channel as much as I can, and I am intending on introducing a lot in the future. I did a channel update a while ago, and I was saying about different things I'm hoping to introduce to the channel. Those haven't happened yet. Anyone who's made it this far in this episode of the podcast, you're going to get the scoop. This is what it is. I have episodes of a series that I'm going to do, which is about the camera work in a specific television series that's quite old, but I'm going to try to compare it to the later versions of that same series. The reason being, the earlier versions have amazing camera work and professional movie directors working on these television series episodes, and the later episodes in the 80s, I think it was, weren't done by these same people and were much lower in quality, in my view. And I want to show that from an artist's point of view and create a bit of work based on, it might just be thumbnails or compositions, but just based on certain aspects of the cinematography and why I think it's important and really influential to me. That's one thing I wanted to do as an update, and I didn't explain it in my channel update because it hasn't happened yet. And to be honest, I haven't started it yet, but I am going to do that. That's my commitment now that I'm mentioning to you. Another thing that is something which I don't think I mentioned what it was. I just said there's something that I'm working on for the channel. This is going to be artist profiles. And I don't know how often I'll be able to produce these and publish them on the channel, but I'm definitely working on the first one, and I have been for a few months with an artist who I want to do a profile on. And I'm going to try and do that on several people as often as I can, but it certainly won't be once a week. It might not even be once a month, but just whenever I can produce an artist profile, I'll try to do that. What I mean by an artist profile is an in-depth talk with them. It's kind of like an interview, but not like the podcast interview. It's going to be more it's not going to be based on my questions. It's going to be more about the information that presents who the artist is, because my questions on the podcasts are about specific ideas that I like to have as prompts for creative people to discuss and explore their own thoughts and feelings around the creative process or their ideas and their opinions within these certain areas. It's quite constrained in that way, and that might be changing in the future, but for the time being there's a lot of those questions in the podcast that I think are quite interesting. Now, the artist profile is going to be a little bit more long form in certain areas, but it will show real insight with video and photographs of where that artist's environment is and what their practice looks like and things like that. Just like a bit more of an interesting, just like a profile on who the person is. That's another thing that I'm going to do. That's a channel update that I'm working on. And the third thing that I'm considering doing, but I haven't committed to yet, is kind of, how can I explain this? It's kind of discussing the more difficult things which I've been dealing with over the past few months, if not past couple of years, and trying to share that openly with the audience. That's going to be tricky. that is going to be a tricky thing to do, because I'm talking about things which involve other people, and I'm not going to name any names. I might not even be able to name places because of the implications of doing things like that. So instead, I'm just going to say to you certain words that are specific enough that describe entities. As in, if I were to say a library, I went to a library and this happened or whatever. It's not a library, but I'm just saying as an example, that's a specific entity where you can imagine a library. I don't need to say this library on this street. What I'm going to do is discuss what happened, be completely honest about what happened, but redact any names or specifics or descriptions which would identify the people. But I am going to talk about the relationships, and I don't mean romantic relationships. I mean the relationships between the people in positions of power that I think are really corrupt, because I was shocked to experience this over the last couple of years, and that's something that I'm considering doing as a short series. And who knows, I might do it, I might record it and see what it looks like first. If it goes well, then I'm going to try and share more and more about I have quite a few stories that I could share about my experience in trying to sell art, or being an artist, or being out in public and interacting with people. And it's going to be more on the confrontational side, or the unpleasant things that I've experienced, and I'm going to share those as a series, where I don't like to do that in my podcast, because I want my podcast to be more academic and informative and almost educational, and my art videos, I want those to be kind of like concept based and tutorials. So this other idea is going to be informative, but it's going to have that negative experience that I've had as a cautionary tale for anyone out there who's thinking about being an artist, or is wondering what can go wrong, and I'm going to try and advise you on what I should have done compared to what I did do. So that's another update, and I really want the channel to grow, not just for the prospect of monetization, but I'd like to share the artwork and the conversation with a larger audience, and that's my hopes. That's what I'm going to try and do, and if I can get your support doing that, it means the world to me. I really appreciate anyone who just watches the channel anyway, so thank you very much for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, as I said earlier, please leave a like, comment down below, subscribe to the channel, ring the notification bell, and I'll see you in the next episode.